Good evening and welcome to the May 12th Finance Committee meeting. With us this evening, committee members present, President Hay, Councilors Kuchmarek, Clark, and Tran. Also present this evening, Councilors Green, Bezal, Joseph, and Boschman. We will start with 8515, an order transferring $500,000 from wastewater treatment expenses to wastewater treatment capital collection system repair. Director Morawski.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the committee. Both this order request for a budget transfer as well as the successive order on the schedule both have to do with capital expenditures that are required. This first order has to do with repairs necessary and reinforcements to sewer manholes that are actually located within the North Nashua River. In January 2015, we had another sheared off manhole in the river that was the result of ice impacts to the structures. These manholes are approximately 100 years old. This is the second consecutive event. A similar event happened in the winter of 2014. This transfer request is geared towards the construction of the repair of the damaged manhole, as well as the design, engineering, and construction costs associated with the remaining 3 manholes. There's 2 additional manholes, both of which are active, and there's an abandoned manhole. And DEP, having seen the formation of a pattern here in successive years, is requiring us to address these remaining 3 manholes within calendar 2015. So they're looking to have the remaining 3 manholes addressed before the end of October 2015. This particular order, we're requesting an amendment reducing the transfer amount. When this order was submitted and requested, we had a surplus of approximately $1.2 million in the operating budget, which is the 644-314 org group and munis accounts. The electricity account for the East plant is the largest of the planned 4 accounts that we were going to transfer funds in the fiscal 15 budget. Subsequent further review of that operating budget for electricity raised questions as to why we were so far under budget. It was believed to have been associated with the discontinuance of the incinerator operation. But it appeared that something wasn't right. So I contacted Joe Jordan and to discuss this a little bit further, and he pointed me in the direction of potential either delayed or late billing for electricity. And when I looked into that further, the electric service provider, not the supplier, but the provider, Direct Energy, they hadn't billed us for most of the fiscal 15 year. So we've been following up with Direct Energy on this, and we haven't been able to get them on the phone for our service representative. So we are pursuing the resolution of this, but as a result, it was appropriate to reduce the request, the budget transfer request, until we can get that resolved.
Mr. Morawski, the $375K for the electricity, from what you just said, are you saying that we don't necessarily know yet if we actually will be using that money? Or is that an actual hard and fast savings in FY15 through June 30th?
That was an anticipated savings, and when subsequent review was done on this, in the fiscal 14 cycle, we had 4 invoices on this particular account, some totaling approximately $350,000 to $400,000 in that range for those 4 billing periods combined. So though we haven't been hit with those accounts, so the billing is actually delinquent to us. We're trying to get on Direct Energy to get that resolved.
When we get the bills and pay those bills, are we saying we're still going to have over $375K left in the account? Or is that $375 going to be used to pay those delinquent bills?
That's the latter, Counselor.
Okay, so then why would we be transferring out of the electricity account then? If we're gonna end up using that money?
Well, at the time that the request was made, that wasn't anticipated.
Okay, so you're gonna draw down the request because you've dug in further on it?
That's
And you're
correct.
gonna need that money now?
That's correct.
Okay. Okay, so my only other question then for right now is, well, first of all, what's the request gonna be? What are you looking to draw it down to from 500,000?
Reduced down from 500,000 to 200,000 at this time.
And do we happen to know of that 200,000, where that's coming out of, what the accounts are?
I do have the accounts. I don't readily have the account numbers, the munis
You don't
account
need the
numbers.
account- yeah, that's
Okay. Ash disposal, 50,000, magnesium hydroxide, 25,000, polymer, 50,000, and natural gas, 75,000, sum totaling 200.
Okay, my only other comment is, and this is more of a general comment, but, and I know you came on after the budget was finalized, but what concerns me a little bit is the amount of money that is in these accounts that doesn't get used. This isn't the first year that I've seen wastewater take money from one account and move it to another. I know that's standard practice, but these are tens of thousands of dollars, in some cases hundreds of thousands of dollars, that we are saying as we get close to it, we do not need, so we're going to apply it to something else. Yet, you know, our rate structures, everything's based on our operating expenses. So when we look at a budget like coming up, you know, it's not wrong for someone like me to suspect that the numbers that we're seeing may very well be a little inflated, just because this has been a recurring theme in wastewater. I've seen several times we've had so much money left over in accounts, and, you know, the budget feeds into what our rate structure is year after year. So I'm not saying the money shouldn't go to wastewater. I'm saying that money should be budgeted in retained earnings or put into a reserve account or something, and not put into these separate accounts. And this happens all over the city, where we have an understanding that I understand the first of the year we're thinking we might need the money, but when there's a recurring theme every year, when I first saw this order request of moving 500 grand, I'm saying to myself, well, that tells me that 500,000 is money that we thought we were going to need, but we don't need it. Well, I mean, in FY16, we get the budget request, I'm going to be skeptical that what I'm looking at is really what the need's going to be. So, and I'm not advocating it be removed, I'm advocating it be put into an account that could be used to draw off to pay for these kinds of emergencies if we know we're not going to, based on historical evidence, we're not going to use the money. But this would be my case in any department, is saying, oh, I don't need $500,000, but I thought I did 7 or 8 months ago. Well, something's wrong there with the forecasting. I mean, you can't be off that much. I mean, 20,000 here, 30,000 there, okay, but 500,000? But with this electricity provider, you said that you guys have contacted them and they haven't really contacted you back? I mean, do they not want to get paid?
I don't understand. Apparently, other departments have had some issues with Direct Energy, the electric service provider. We had tried several calls today and tried different people at Direct Energy trying to get someone on the horn, and we weren't successful.
Because my concern is if we don't spend this money by June 30th, would we encumber it?
Yes,
Okay.
definitely.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. President Hay?
Two questions. How many manholes are being reconstructed?
With this particular order request, we've got one damaged manhole, and that we performed a temporary repair. I'm sorry, I don't mean to give a long-winded answer. We had done a temporary repair to prevent the Nashua River from getting into the collection system. We've got to do the permanent repair on that, and that's part of what this request is, and that's estimated to be approximately $100,000. Beyond that damaged manhole, we've got 3 additional manholes, 2 of which are live and active, and one of which is abandoned, but we have to address all 3.
So we're averaging over $100,000 per manhole.
We're anticipating approximately $250,000 to tackle the remaining 3.
Okay.
If I could add one more thing, we're tackling this damaged manhole by way of our on-call construction contractor agreement, and we want to solicit competitive bids and get better
That was going
pricing.
to be my next question. Does this need to go out through purchasing for bids?
Yes, it will.
And are you, is there a time frame in which you need to have this completed by, or hope to have it completed by?
Hope to have the construction completed before the end of October 2015.
Good luck. Thank you.
Council Joseph?
Just, was the incinerator running last year?
In
FY?
the fiscal,
Fiscal 15?
it was not.
Okay, so when did we stop using the incinerator?
I believe the operation on the incinerator ceased in calendar 12, I believe. I'd have to double check that, to be honest. It was before I came on board.
So, I mean, a quarter to $500,000 electric bill is a hefty electric bill. Is that other processes within the plant that use that much electricity?
That's correct.
Okay. And so even after the incinerator's been retired, you still had $225,000 electric bills?
That's correct. With the shutdown of the incinerator, the anticipated savings wasn't as much as was estimated.
Okay. And you said that there was $1.2 million in retained earnings right now?
That was 1.2 remaining in the the operating budget of the fiscal 15 budget. Sum total.
So what do you have in retained earnings right now?
The retained earnings figure,
Yeah, the 1.2 is within the budget, the operating budget. The retained earnings as of the end of last year was 7.2 million. And as you recall, that is building so that it can address future debt that we're going to be facing.
Okay, now is the $1.2 million also what would be going towards future? Would that also be our retained earnings for this year, going towards future debt?
Well, whatever is closed out, unspent at year end, will help increase that account.
All money within wastewater stays within wastewater,
Yes,
right?
that's correct.
It's an enterprise fund, so it's that,
Right.
if that money's left over, it's going to end up in retained earnings.
Correct.
And you're anticipating, did you have a larger increase in revenue to get this $1.2 million, or is that what you were anticipating, knowing that that money had to go into retained earnings? I guess my bottom line question is, will this $1 million, or whatever you plan on spending to replace these manholes, be above and beyond money that we have put aside for other projects that would cause a problem with our rates?
no would be the answer to that question.
So you feel that you have enough money in retained earnings to keep up all of your projects, put this money, whatever's left over, into retained earnings for CSO projects, and still be able to do this project?
That's correct, Counselor.
Wow. Then somebody's really misquoted the budget and given us too much money to wastewater. I mean, again, I guess I always get upset with retained earnings because that's my money that you're putting aside. If you need my money to do a CSO project, that's one thing, but if you need my money to sit in the bank, then that's another problem. And that's not your problem. You didn't do this budget. So these manholes are in the river or within the sides of the river? How is it?
The damage, 3 of the 4 manholes discussed are actually within the flowing river. The fourth one, which is the abandoned one, is actually at the toe of the embankment going down to the river.
So is this the only stretch of sewer pipes that we have in the river?
Well, we do have other areas where we've got sewers that cross the river. As a for instance, fairly close to this project area, we do have a 45-inch diameter trunk sewer that bisects or cuts perpendicular to the river. And this particular stretch where we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 manholes are along a run of sewer that's running parallel to and within the bed of the river.
So if I'm looking off the Fifth Street Bridge, is that the area that we're talking about? Or the, whatever we call it?
It's a ways away. It's actually a stretch that's between where Sawyer Passway crosses over the North Nashua River and where Water Street crosses over the North Nashua River. It's in between those, where Market Basket is,
Yeah.
in that ballpark.
Okay. I guess I want a review of the budget when we get to that. I guess we're a couple of months or a month away, so a couple of weeks away.
Counselor Kuchmarek?
Commissioner, I know, things break all the time, particularly when we're talking, system 100 years old, but was this on our radar whatsoever prior to this fiscal year?
That's a good question. Prior to this year, we had a damaged manhole, and it wasn't perceived to be necessarily a problem. I think it was thought to be a fluke at that time. Now, having had 2 broken manholes in consecutive years, similar vintages, it created the formation of pattern and concern to have them addressed. So I had actually had a similar concern that DEP had when we had the second damaged manhole.
I know you're new to this role, but I guess I'm curious as to why this wasn't on our radar, or why this wasn't on the department's radar 5-10 years ago. It sounds like this is, whenever you've got manholes in the river, this is kind of an area of concern that should probably be revisited on a cyclical basis to make sure that everything's working properly. And any indication as to why this wasn't caught earlier?
I can't speak to that, but I'd like to have wastewater go along the pathway of asset management where we are looking at the criticality of various elements of assets and the risk of failure of those, and start to weigh the decision-making process so that we have things prioritized correctly.
Great. I'll be thrilled to hear when we start talking about asset management and thinking long-term and identifying those areas of weaknesses and of strengths, and you can start forecasting out and budgeting based on those areas of weakness and immediate need. Do we have any other areas such as this that we already know of that are going to cost in this ballpark in the next couple fiscal years that we need to know about?
Nothing is on the radar in this type of scenario. We don't have in other areas.
And I know you said this is your anticipated or your desired completion date was October 2015 of this year, and it sounds like it's kind of a timeline that's dictated by the EPA. Is that correct? Or
DEP, if that makes a difference. I'm not sure that it does. It's a regulatory body.
Is that time frame dictated by the DEP then?
That was communicated to me by the head of wastewater in the central region of DEP.
And if we fail to meet that October 2015 timeframe?
That hasn't been stipulated. I think they're trying to, personal opinion is I think they're trying to draw the line in the sand somewhere, and they want us to have this repair done before the onset of winter, realistically, so that we don't have more ice flows coming down the river and potentially damaging the remaining manholes and creating a similar situation that we had the past 2 years.
And my only concern here is when we start talking, procurement and going out to bid, that it's going to be yet another a process that takes months and months, and it just, quite frankly, too long to get done. This is obviously something that could cost us more in the long run if we don't get done. And I'm getting sick of hearing, the DEP and the EPA are always, threatening us with fines because it takes us so long to get things done. It would be nice to actually meet a deadline, where they don't feel like they have to threaten us with a fine to get something done. So I hope, it's my sincere hope that purchasing can move this process along expeditiously, so we can go out to bid, get this done during this year's construction season, and move past this. Thank you.
I just wanted to add one thing, Mr. Morosky. Your predecessor was notorious for fighting with me in open session on cuts to the wastewater budget. So understand that I'm not naive to the fact that we may have things happen throughout the year that require a change in strategy, but when I'm told that there's $1 million of money that isn't needed, but it's applied elsewhere, that bothers me a little bit, especially when I've already went through the ringer with the former director trying to cut maybe a quarter of that. And he told the rest of the council, raise the red flags. If you do that, the whole place is going down. I'm exaggerating for an effect, but that's what we get every department head to say, yes, after 7 or 8 years, if I budget $1 million and I only spend $700,000 of it every year for 7 years, my point is, why would we budget $1 million for the 8th year? It's likely we're not going to use it. But every department head will fight tooth and nail, as they probably should, to keep that extra $300,000. I hope this council understands that this is a citywide issue. So there's going to be more scrutiny next go-around, because if I see for the 8th year that there are accounts that are significantly underspending, I'm going to recommend it be removed. I mean, if not going to be used, there must be something in the department that they can use that money for. This isn't a 1 or a 2 year deal. This is 7 or 8 years now. So this bothers me a lot, because I recall very vividly the former director fighting me tooth and nail on any cuts into his budget. And my only other comment before I move on here is the fact that we have to have purchasing work on this by October. I'd like to ask you, please, to let the council know as soon as you can if you are running into any problems, because the concerns I have are communication gaps and ensuring that your department knows what is required of you to get this bid process going. Because the frequent complaint I get is there's no communication. So if you are running to any roadblocks, please let the council know so we can help you guys get this through the pipeline. It's unfortunate that I have to make that request, but given our track record, my skepticism is high that you'll meet that October deadline, given our past history. Councilor Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to, when it comes to 85-15, amend that figure from 500,000 to 200,000.
If I could request that that be held, Council. I have some councilors who are not on the committee that wanted to speak.
Absolutely.
If I could, please. Councilor Green.
Thank you. My only question is, are we being fined right now by the DEP for any sewerage issue that's running into the Nashua River?
Relative to this incident?
Okay, we'll answer that one first.
No.
Okay, not relative to this issue?
We're not being fined. If we were to have, for instance, a bypass of our secondary treatment system, usually in association with a wet weather event, the plant has a certain capacity, and when that capacity gets exceeded, we've got a provision built into the system where it bypasses secondary treatment, and it gets forms of chemical treatment and then disinfection and dechlorination before it gets reblended with that flow that did go through secondary treatment. So that can result in exceedances of our NIPD's permit, but we've not been fined associated with that. There is a reporting process on a monthly basis where we have to submit reporting to both DEP and EPA on the operation of the plant, but we've not been fined. If that answers your question, Counselor.
that does answer my question, but if that's a possibility of what may happen in the future, what's the contingency plan on taking care of that? I mean, if we're hearing that you've got $1.2 million in surplus in your budget, and we're looking to potentially maybe make cuts to your overall budget, if that was to happen, if that was to occur, what would we be looking at for fines?
I believe it would depend on the nature of the violation and the duration of the violation. I would have to have a more specific scenario, and I would have to get some input from both EPA and DEP.
Okay, do you think that our system is in good shape, that we would be protected from an event like that? I mean, if you're talking 100-year-old systems, you know, everything has a lifespan, so I'm wondering where we are in the process of replacing this old stuff.
Well, since the inception of the consent decree, we have had staffing increases and staff associated with the collection system. We've been doing condition assessment of the entire collection system, and we're progressing with the goal being to inspect the entire system within a 5-year time frame. So as we're doing that inspection, we're cleaning lines, we're CCTV videoing the lines, and we're doing condition assessment of those lines. In addition to that, we've got other consent decree requirements where we are developing or updating our hydraulic model of the collection system, and that hydraulic model will be utilized for capacity assessment, sewer system evaluation survey, infiltration and inflow analysis and removal, in successive later stages of the consent decree requirements.
All right, thank you.
Council Beazle.
And do we have a map of the infrastructure in the city and how old all the pipes are within the city on every road? Is that something that we have?
We have that. It's something which is in development. It goes hand in hand with the inspections that we're doing. We do have GIS of the collection system, and we're updating that, and the GIS has information on pipe materials, diameters. I believe they have age of installation as well. An earlier phase of the consent decree required something called a CMOM self-assessment, and we were characterizing the collection system based on pipe diameters, pipe materials, and ages of installation, just to have an overall view of the existing collection system. We are learning more and more about the system as the ongoing inspections progress.
So do you have sort of a business plan or a business model as to timetables as to when things are going to be needed to be repaired in the future, and kind of estimating what you're going to be needing for future revenues?
We don't yet have that. That goes hand in hand with the asset management philosophy. Just assessing the system doesn't give you everything you need to make that decision. You have to start making decisions based on need and priority. Something that's closer to the outskirts of the system would be a lower priority than something that's a more arterial type of sewer, if you will, if that helps make sense. So
Yep.
we need to start putting these pieces together for planning purposes.
Okay. And lastly, I know we talk about your $7 million in reserve and then another $1.2 million. Is there any way for the councilors that are kind of new to this, because I know that Dick had said we're going to be needing all of that in the future, is there any way that you could probably spell out for us like what the payment plan is and how these funds are going to be used in the future, so that we can have better knowledge when we're saying to ourselves, geez, how much money do we have in there? Really, how these funds are going to be needed in the future. Is there, I mean, do you have those numbers, or?
I have the resources that can produce those numbers, and it had to do partly with the rate increase and what we were anticipating that rate increase was going to pay for, and that was projecting forward for work that we had to do that was associated with the consent decree. Now, since that projection had happened, and I believe that happened while we were still within the negotiation phase with EPA and DEP on the consent decree, so it dates to late 2010. And since that time, we've had our first separation job started and finished, the CSS 2B3C job, and the second one is currently in progress. And we've got a big plant upgrade, which is not yet out to bid yet. So I believe that some of the forecasted costs that went into that were lower than what they are right now for the 4D and for the secondary system upgrades project.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor Joseph?
So I guess in lieu of that, if we could ask the president if maybe that we could get a presentation from the wastewater on the progress of the CSO and the plant upgrades, so we can see what's been done, what hasn't been done, what's been done, and what effect it's had on the collection system, whether it's met the goals of the collection system. Just at a regular council meeting, just an upgrade on the whole process to see how we're doing, because it seems like I really can't tell, and I don't want to spend time in finance because we're dealing with broken manhole covers to go through that whole project, but I think we need an update on the project.
Are you all set for the motion now?
I am. I don't have any other.
Everybody
Anybody
all
wishes to
set?
speak? Yep.
8515, transferring 500,000 be amended to 200,000.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to amend 8515, removing 500,000 and adding to it 200,000.
Move 8515.
All those in favor of the amendment?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's before you.
Move 8515 be adopted as
Second.
amended.
Motion made and seconded to adopt 8515 as amended. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It is unanimous. 8615, order transfer 500,000 from wastewater treatment debt service to wastewater treatment capital collection system repair. I just have one quick question on this one. Coming out of debt service, what's the reason for $500,000 being available in that account?
When the budget was prepared a year ago, it was in anticipation of possible issuance of additional SRF loans, and those were issued during this fiscal year, I think in November or January, but the first payment of those loans is not until next fiscal year. And not only, and we're talking about, I think this year they issued 13 million, so it's substantial. In addition to that, usually in the first year of an SRF loan, we have to pay substantial admin fees. It could be like 100,000, and then it's a small fee per year of maybe $10,000. So
Did you guys anticipate a date of when those were going to be issued?
no, we weren't sure,
Okay.
so it was more of a conservative estimate. And the proof of the issue is, I think, on next year's budget, the debt budget actually goes up quite a bit because we're starting to pay some more loans. And let me just say on that 1.2 million, that's the balance in that account right now. Of that 1.2 million, Jeff is saying he's comfortable with transferring 200,000 of it. So a lot of that $1 million that remains will be probably spent. We're not sure how much yet.
That's correct.
And excuse me again, if there's 300, if after he does more work that they find the 300,000 is available in that $1 million that remains, he'll be back for that difference.
Well, it wouldn't be 200,000, it would be 700, right? Are you amending this order 8615 down as well? Or is that the full,
No,
for the
that's
full
out of the
500?
debt.
Oh, that's out of the debt, I'm sorry.
That's a
Okay, separate
that's out
account,
of a
okay.
separate account.
So
Okay.
the delta would be
Yeah.
300.
Okay.
Move over 8615 be adopted.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to adopt 8615. Any questions on the motion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It is unanimous. Thank you. Next is 8715, an order, transfer $90,000 from health insurance to accounts as follows: $40,000 to employers FICA, $40,000 to other employee benefits, and $10,000 to general insurance. Mr. Saracen.
Thank you, councilors. Usually around this time of year, I go through with the departments, the finance team, we go through the accounts to see where we stand. Some accounts, they're big dollar amounts, some of these budgeted accounts, and usually we try to transfer from within. Fortunately, this year, there's money, as we talked about at the previous finance meeting, in health insurance. There were many people that transitioned out of the Fallon plan, and we also had the phase-in of the Medex 2 program. So there's money in that account. The three accounts that need funds, employers FICA, that account we knew was short, was very tight this year. It's budgeted at $850,000, and that's the employer's share of the FICA for Medicare that we have to match for employees. And what happens is that account goes up because as any employees who started prior to 1988, they're not subject to that additional tax. So as people retire, the newer people coming on are paying that FICA, and we have to match it. So it typically goes up about $30,000 a year, and so there's money needed there. The other benefits, this covers vacation and personal day buybacks to employees during the year, and also people that retire. This year we did see a number of people at high end that retired, and they got substantial payouts. Both of these are conservative estimates. We may not need all of this money, but we're not sure, especially on the buybacks, of what people are going to do between now and the end of the year. Like on the buyback account right now, there's a balance of about $20,000, but we know we have about 20 that is committed to. The final account, the general insurance, I'm just looking for another $10,000 in that account. The premiums were very tight based on loss runs, and we have had endorsements for new equipment, the large equipment for DPW, the new fire truck. So mid-year we got hit with additional premiums. So that's basically where we are.
President Hay.
Yeah, Dick, you got $180,000 here, which you're saying you're taking out of health insurance.
90.
90,000.
I'm sorry, 90,000 out of the health insurance, out of the 180. Does that mean next year's line item for health insurance should be $90,000 less? Because we'll anticipate that we won't need as much as we thought we were going to need this year?
It actually, there's more than that in that account, and as we talked about, is an additional $300,000 that we may be trying to transfer to the schools this year. So it was mainly because of that major shift in the population and the conversion to the Medex 2 program. So next year's budget, if you look at next year's budget, it'll be probably level funded from what we budgeted last year. So it was budgeted at 13.4. We feel we're estimating conservatively that we may spend about 12.9, and then with the new population, we're budgeting 13.3. I believe the mayor is budgeting 13.3, but we have an updated population, so it's a lot tighter going into next year.
Thank you.
Yep.
Councilor Kuchmarek.
Mr. Saracen, it seems like this account for the past couple or few years has been in a similar situation where we're at this point in the year where we're transferring funds from health insurance to other areas in need in the city. I guess I'm just curious why. I mean, you explained it a little bit as to, how the estimates might have been off this year, but I guess I'm just curious about why are we always so far off? Why there are always hundreds of thousands of dollars left available in this account at the end of the year? Should we not budget a little bit more conservatively to start?
Well, they're over because we did budget conservatively. You got to be prepared for new people coming on, or people that do not have a that do not elect to choose our insurance, 10 people coming on could be $100,000. And so you got to be prepared for that. The other thing is that you know, 100,000 may seem like a lot, but that budget is 13 million, 13 and change. So I don't know what the percentage is, but it'd probably be like 4%. It isn't a major cost item, and the amount per person could be significant. We do try to budget conservatively, because to go the other way would be dangerous. If we under budgeted and we needed 300,000 right now, it would be difficult to come up with that.
Thank you.
I mean, let me just say, going forward, there's also, when people decease, we stop paying the benefits. That, we don't budget for that, but you budget for people coming on, possibly.
2.3%.
Can you, I mean, there must be, as morbid as this may sound, there must be some kind of equation where we can generally assume a certain percentage of the population will decease over time. Do we ever calculate based on a certain percentage? This is also retirees, or is this only current employees? I don't know.
Yeah, like, I got last year's report. We were over by 200,000 of 13 million. This year was significant because of the major shifting, so it's like 400,000 or 500,000. That I don't see that happening in the next year, because we haven't updated. We have it's all Blue Cross products. No longer Fallon isn't in there. There is the population is in place based on what they're opting for benefits. So I don't know if I answered your question there, but probably not. I mean, $200,000 is not a lot of money when you look at this budget, and you want to make sure you budget enough.
And while I understand what you're saying, that in by percentage of that particular line item,
Yeah.
200,000, or in this case, it sounds like if we've got 300,000 more, it's really close to $400,000 this year that we have in excess. I mean, well, that may not seem a lot compared to that line item. $400,000 is a lot, compared to areas of need in this city that are drastically underfunded.
What did you say the balance was last year? We were
It was
200
about 240.
We had 240 left last year, right?
Yep. Out of 13 million.
Are you done, Council? I didn't mean to thank President Hay.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, when you say we had 240 left, but that was also after transferring money out towards the end of the year. How much did we transfer out and still have 240 left?
I don't have that if we did.
Okay.
I do have 13 million that we had appropriated at the end of the year.
Yeah.
There might have been, you're right, I don't remember if we budgeted that even.
Okay, thank you.
Motion to accept 87-15.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to adopt 87-15. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous. 8815, order appropriate $9,170 to be credited to fire equipment and repair and charge against available funds. Chief Roy.
Good evening, councilors. Councilors, just I'm sure most of you know Lieutenant Dante Suarez. I know the council always likes to know who works on these grants. And just to give you a little history of what's going on, I think most of you know, since 2009, the AFG grants, which are through FEMA, I think during that 5-year span, we got 11 grants, I believe, totaling in the millions of dollars in different areas. Here, when we do the grants, which we've been successful, last year we weren't. We submitted 3 grants, which is the maximum we can do, and we got shut out. So when we do that, we go back and look and say, well, what are we asking for? What's the problem? Why didn't we get this grant? Because we're kind of used to being successful. Lieutenant Suarez came to me with an age-old problem. This is going to solve an issue that we've had in all my years on the job, and it was in grant money. $100,000 isn't a whole lot, and it was very receptive, and it was awarded on the first round of grants this year. So there's two sections here to it, but I'm just going to let Dante give you a little background of what it's about and what it's going to get for us, because it is a little different in the realm of buying trucks or getting manpower and those things. So Dante did a great job with it. He worked extremely hard on it, and like I say, we were awarded in the first round, so.
Good evening. So what this grant will be used for is to purchase hoses and nozzles that are NFPA 1963 compliant, which is a fire service standard. And basically what that means is that once we meet the standard, we'll become interoperable with all the surrounding towns that already meet this standard and are already compliant. Because of our old mills, all our hoses had iron pipe thread, which is now antiquated. The standard has a national standard thread, which we don't use. So with this grant, we'll buy all hoses, nozzles, and meet that standard. And like I said, we'll be interoperable with all the surrounding towns.
I can tell you, councilors, this dates back to Chief Fleckner wanting to do this, and it doesn't sound like a big deal, but it is, because all our inch and three-quarter hose, which is our attack lines, once you change the thread, all the connections on all the pumpers have to be changed, all the nozzles have to be changed, and we never had an extra $100,000 to do that, although we should have, and it's because the paper mills in the city always used iron pipe for their hose connections, and we adapted to that like many old mill towns did. So this is going to bring us in compliant, as the lieutenant said, with the national standard thread, which is pretty much becoming the national usage of departments. There's only a few left in the area that have the old plumber's iron pipe thread. So it's a pretty good project. Like I say, it was a lot of hard work, and the $9,100 in 8815 is our share of the grant. It's a 10% match on our part, and then the second 8915 is approving the remaining 91,000 for a total of $100,878. I know Councilor Di Natale is going to ask. We're going to probably have to do some work through purchasing, but the lieutenant has already got a lot of prices. A lot of this stuff will be bought off a state bid, and the lieutenant's already got a lot of that legwork done to spec out the hoses and nozzles, so we're hoping to move it. And in any case, we have 1 year to get this grant done, which we hope to have it done a lot sooner, but the clock started on April 24th, so we have 1 year from April 24th to complete this. So we believe we won't have a problem with it.
Chief, you said that Lieutenant, is it?
Yes.
Lieutenant Suarez already has done the legwork. Does purchasing know he's done the legwork?
No.
That scares me.
I believe we can get this one done, Counselor. And
I hope so. It is before you.
Move
Oh,
already.
I have a Counselor Kuchmarek.
Chief, you answered my two questions about about one, purchasing, and two, what the 9170 actually was for. But I just want to congratulate you both. Just the tremendous work you do in securing grants throughout the city. I know we're fortunate that there's so many state and federal grant opportunities for fire prevention, fire safety, but I feel like you're routinely in front of us telling us about a grant that we received for the first round of funding, and working with organizations that get grants that shouldn't be missed. I think you guys do a tremendous job, and for all your efforts.
Move 8815 and 8915 be adopted.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to adopt 8815 and 8915. 8915 is the 90% funding from FEMA for the grant that was already explained. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? 8815, 8915 is adopted unanimously. Thank you, gentlemen. 90-15, order transfer $30,000 to fire personal services overtime from fire personal services. Chief.
Councilors, as some of you may know, we've had some unanticipated couple of resignations during this fiscal year, and we've had 3 retirements, but one of them that we didn't think was going to happen until next year happened this year. And in that time frame, especially on the resignations, we have to wait for civil service lists to come through and run the new candidates through everything. So there was some time lapse involved in those 5 vacancies. So we have money in the firefighter line item account because those people were gone and weren't getting paid but subsequently, we had to fill those jobs with overtime. So this is transferring $30,000 out of our firefighter personal service salaries that were saved during the weeks that we were waiting for lists and people were off the payroll, and filling vacancies on that. In addition to that, we've spent $28,000 on working fires this year. Just since January 1st, we've had 6 multiple alarm fires. We've helped other communities. So the combination of the two has run our overtime account down a little bit, and we would need this to finish out the year.
Counselor Kuchmarek?
Chief, how many resignations did you say have taken place? this
2.
fiscal- 2. Any concerns with those resignations? I take it we do exit interviews and get a good sense.
One of them was, no, the answer is no. They were both personal reasons that they decided to, and they were younger firefighters. They were some of the ones we've hired recently, and it was personal reasons.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor Joseph?
Does mutual aid fires cause us to incur overtime?
It does, Counselor, in cases where we send multiple apparatus, like the other night in Gardner, we sent 2 engines and a ladder. That strips our city. Every other cities around were responding. At the same time, we had numerous brush fires going on, so we recalled some people to put our reserve trucks in service. Our fires here in Fitchburg obviously require the same, but Leominster has had some multiple alarm fires. Gardner, we had multiple alarm fire, I believe it was in Westminster, where we had to send help. So when we send 1 or 2 trucks, the answer is no. But once we start sending 3, 4 pieces of apparatus, that strips our city. And usually when it's a fire that big, we can't get mutual aid from somebody else around us. So we recall our people.
Is it kind of a mutual aid agreement that if we incur, if we have a fire that incurs overtime from another city, we don't pay them, and if they have a fire that makes us incur overtime, we don't charge them?
Correct. That's a state law that we adopted back in the 50s. We take care of our own expenses. If our firefighters are hurt in another town, we pick it up. If some of theirs are hurt here, they pick up the bills. All in costs incurred by the city.
Okay.
Move 09-15 be adopted.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to adopt 90-15. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It is unanimous.
Thank you.
Lastly, 92-15, a petition of Councilor Paul Boschman to raise the fine to $50 for violation of the parking ban during a snow emergency. Councilor Boschman.
Yeah, I put that petition in. I talked about it when we were raising the rates, from when we wanted to raise the rates $5 and I wanted to go to 50, and I was explaining the reason why, that it seems like we're encouraging people to park on the streets. If I repeat my statement, that if somebody hires a guy to plow their driveway, they're paying an average of $35 to $45 to $50 to drop their plow. For the DPW to send a guy back over to do the streets over again costs about $100, plus loss of productivity. According to Lenny, if he has all cars moved off the road, he can save anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000 per storm. Since I've been on the council, we spent almost $1 million last year, and we spent $1.3 million this year. I know we had a lot of snow. What I'm trying to do is discourage parking on the city streets and let them find parking spaces. I think we have an obligation to the homeowner. I believe that if you hired Councilor Joseph to do your driveway, and he had to come back, and he charged you an extra $30, you guys would be upset. And I would be upset. You would figure that doing it once would be cost saving. He could come back and touch up. But if he charges you again, you would be upset. Well, we're incurring the cost as homeowners and that. I'm not out to punish anybody or to hurt the poor people or anybody. But if you look at it, we're actually hurting homeowner because we're doing the streets twice in some areas or 3 times some areas. And when they go back down and they push that snow back, now we get Councilor Clark mad because we just pushed the snow in his driveway and now he's got to shovel the end of his driveway, or the city feels sorry, so they come back and they push the snow away from him, and there's no reason why. We're not asking for a lot. We're asking 15 times a year, approximately 15 times, to move your cars. In other communities, they start in November and they end in April, no parking on the streets during the winter parking ban. We ask 15 times to move your car. That's all we ask. And they can't do it. So this is why I asked for the $50 from 30 to 50. So this way here, at least the city recoups some of its money it loses on the DPW. That's why.
I'll just state that, just for the committee's edification, I spoke to the police chief this afternoon. He wanted me to let the committee know his opposition to this petition, considering, stressing that it did not come from the police or the DPW, and reminding everybody that we just raised it from 25 to 30. And he also wanted me to indicate to everybody that, you know, for the size storm that we had this past season, ticketing was still numerous at times, but, you know, all in all, there was a lot of good cooperation from the residents, and he just wanted me to relay that to the committee. My own opinion on this is I'm not doubting that there is there's legitimacy behind fining individuals who are knowingly violating the ban. But my concern with this entire ordinance, like the snow removal on sidewalks, is I hope the city, and I trust the city, is using discretion when they ticket on a case-by-case basis, because there are sections throughout the city where there are residents who are in a position where they cannot move their cars. They have nowhere to put them. And there are elderly residents or disabled residents who cannot plow their own sidewalks. So I hope there is discretion, and I believe there is, because Commissioner Laxo has said such. As long as they can get a car through the street, or emergency personnel through the street, they'll be rather lenient. But I just don't feel the necessity in raising it to $50 when we just raised it to $30. I feel more inclined to focus on the actual enforcement of these petitions and not so much the fine. I mean, if there are people who are regularly violating the law at $30, I don't understand why another $20 would deter them. If this is just to recoup some of our losses, again, usually these fines are requested from the departments that are issuing the tickets. So I'm not necessarily saying I disagree with the mentality. We just raised it, and I take great stock in the police chief and the DPW commissioner input on this. So I will likely vote against this. Councilor Kuchmarek.
I agree with Councilor Boschman and the intent of this petition. You know, I think it's good of us to help the DPW be as efficient as possible during these storms that can be crippling at times to the city. And you know, it's also, we have an officer, and we're having an officer out there on the road during a snowstorm, during a snow event, and they're issuing tickets. I want it to be as an effective a deterrent of future violations as possible. So I support going from 30 to 50. You know, hopefully it's you know, it is a future deterrent for folks to not park on the road. I also agree with Councilor Di Natale's point of, you know, hope there is some discretion, you know, where it makes sense, and that there are some areas of the city where folks might not have the opportunity to relocate their cars, particularly sometimes during you know, kind of rapid inclement weather. And I have seen our DPW try to be as accommodating as possible. But I want to make sure that when we are issuing tickets, that it's as effective as possible in deterring future behavior like this, and hopefully we can make our DPW more efficient and save some money down the road. Thank you.
President Hay.
Thank you. I think Councilor Di Natale, excuse me, makes a good point when he indicates that neither the DPW or the police have requested this. The fact that we just changed it from 25 to 30 also is an increase that's already there. And while I agree with Councilors Kuchmarek and Councilor Boschman that there needs to be some deterrent, I think that people who are going to not pay attention to the snow ban are not going to pay attention to the snow ban no matter what. And I think by increasing this, what you're going to do is put a hardship on the individual who in one instance, because of a variety of circumstances, whether they are sick, or they have sick children, or they're out of town and their car is left on the street, or whatever, who can ill afford the $30, never mind the $50. Because the people who are getting the tickets, the majority of them, are living in the lower income neighborhoods, the inner city neighborhoods. And I just don't feel the need to burden them more. I think that the $30 fine is appropriate. We also have the ability to tow if it is somebody who is done an egregious job of parking or is a repeat offender for parking. They have the ability to go and tow that car, and then you're really running up some money and some bills on that person, and that's the appropriate person to go after. Thank you.
Councilor Joseph.
Councilor Hay just hit it on the head. If it's a nuisance and it's a repeat and it's a problem on an intersection, that's what they make tow trucks for. We have the ability to tow trucks, to tow cars during a snow emergency. If somebody wants to leave their car out there for 2 nights and continue to get $30 fines for 2 nights and they're still there, put them on a tow truck, get them out of there. There's no number of $50 tickets is going to make them move that car. But a couple of $100 tow fee and a storage fee might just get them to do that. I just don't see $30, $50 making that much difference, but a tow fee definitely makes a big difference.
Councilor Boschman.
You know, I listened to some of your councilors talk, and I listened to you, Councilor DiNatale, and you, Councilor Joseph, Mike Kushmerek, and Amy, and I agree to a certain extent, but aren't we forgetting about the homeowner? The homeowner that pays the bills of the city of Fitchburg, the taxpayer? Aren't we forgetting about them? A few months ago, the DPW guy sat right here in front of us in that table. And I asked him the question. He said he could save, if the streets were clear with no cars, $5,000 to $10,000. I'll even go $3,000 per storm. Isn't that worth saving per storm? 3,000, 10 storms, you're talking $30,000? What about the homeowner that the parents are on Social Security and they're just barely making it? Don't they count? So it's okay for them to go and do Clarendon Street 10 times and have the guy work overtime all this time? That's not right for them, is it? I understand and I sympathize when we're talking about my neighborhood. I sympathize with the people living in there. But it's not the city's responsibility to find parking. It is the landlord's responsibility to provide the parking for his tenants because he's in business. And he should provide parking if he wants his tenants. And if he can't get parking, so the tenants should have moved there. It isn't our responsibility to do it. And if there's a problem, like on Arlington Street, they came before the city of Fitchburg and asked if they could park on one side of the street. And the city allowed them. I have no problem with that. But we're not going to tow all the time. Gary has to sit there. And he said he can't be there. He's got work to do. So sometimes we don't tow. Sometimes the car sits there and sits there and sits there. And sometimes we don't give tickets either. They're out there. I seen it from my own 2 eyes right across the street from where I live. There was a car on the street. They never get a ticket. Yeah, the road's wide enough, but there was a parking ban enforced. I have no problem with somebody parks on the sidewalk. Doesn't bother me. I won't call up and say, hey, there's car parked on the sidewalk. But if you can't plow the streets right, why do you want to pay twice? Would you pay me twice? No, you wouldn't pay me twice. You say, hey, go scratch yourself. I think I'm fighting for the homeowner. The homeowner's flipping the bill. And if we can save $3,000 to $5,000 a storm, then so be it. We should save $5,000 a storm, 10 storms. We're just asking them to move the car 15 times. If we're lucky, 15 times. That's it.
Move down to 15 be adopted.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to adopt 9215. Speaking on the motion, I just want to say, Councilor Boschman, I am not suggesting that you are not keeping in mind those who are less fortunate with this fine. My concern is, usually these matters are brought to us by the enforcement authorities. If Chief Martineau or Commissioner Laxo came before the council and said to us that the reason why people are not following the law is because the fine is not stringent enough, then I could see there's a good case to raising it. We've already raised it 20%, and you just said yourself that in front of your house, you see cars parked there that have no tickets. Well, that's my whole point, is raising it from $30 to $50 isn't going to change that aspect. The concern that you're expressing, and that is a legitimate concern, is maybe the enforcement mechanisms and how often it's being applied and how it's being applied. But I don't see any evidence to suggest that raising it by more than double is going to stop repeat offenders like that, especially when the people who are doing the enforcement have not told us that that is the reason why these people continue to flout the law. Unless Commissioner Laxo and Chief Martineau see a concern for the fine being too small, as they did a few months ago when they said we should raise it from 25 to 30, I could see there's a good case for that. But through your own testimony, you proved my point in saying that these people that are offending, it's not affecting them one way or another. Your issue is that car didn't get a ticket, period. Now, maybe if that car got a $25 or $30 fine, that car wouldn't be parked there anymore. But you just said that never happened. So my concern is enforcement first, and what are we doing to apply it, and then worry about the fine second. Because there are many instances like the one you're experiencing that probably happen. I have no doubt about that. We got to figure out why that's happening instead of worrying about what the fine is. Let's enforce it first before we start raising fines. And again, we've already raised it. So this is my opinion. I have a motion on the floor and a second, so I can only take comments from committee members on approving 9215. Any questions or comments on the motion? All those in favor of adopting 9215?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? 3 in opposition. Does not pass, 3-2.
We're adjourned.
Motion made and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you.